Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a geopolitical news update. All sorts of stuff is going on around the world. I'll try and keep you up to date with everything. We're going to start looking at Iran. We're going to look at the UK, some fun stuff going on in the House of Commons in the UK that I think it would be good to look at. We're going to go to Pedro Sanchez in Spain and see some of the very important things that he's saying at the moment, and see if we have time for some European stuff thereafter, particularly concerning Hungary, and maybe even time for some US information concerning polls, elections, and shoes. I want to show you something to do with shoes. It's all happening. Right, without further ado, let me go on, but I am on my own, so if you have pertinent questions, the easiest, and I'm not saying this for greed or anything, but the easiest way for me to see things is with super chats, because they come up in a separate color and they go into a different area, and so I can really easily see them. Otherwise, maybe put something with capitals, question, if you have something that you would like to ask, if you think I may be able to cast a cogent opinion on it, but essentially it's going to be difficult for me to check out the live chat. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate those who have already done so, and thank you to the amazing members and subscribers that are already helping out with the channel. Thank you to people like Mark and Onola. Thank you to Michael Winkler and all the wonderful people who support the channel so much. Okay, let's now get on with looking at the details that I have put forward to discuss with you. Okay, right. We are going to go, first of all, I think it's interesting that this is retweeted by Che Bose, who is a Russian-based horrendous journalist, and Alexander Dugin, who's Putin's brain, reposting this from JD Vance. I think this is from when Iran got involved. Sorry, the US got involved with Iran last time. I'm not sure this is recent, because he's kind of gone and he's disappeared, gone under the radar for the last few weeks since the US has started this attack on Iran. But this is just to remind you of a bit of JD Vance. I think this is the best way to open the video.
I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long drawn out thing. We've got in. We've done the job of setting their nuclear program back. We're going to now work to permanently dismantle that nuclear program over the coming years. And that is what the president has set out to do. Simple principle. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That has animated American policy over the past 130 days. It's going to continue to be a driving force of our policy in the Middle East for the next 3.5 years.
Why this is such a good introduction to the video is because he says this time it's different because previously all the presidents of the United States were dumb. Now, our president, Donald Trump, is not dumb. I'm now going to set forth how Donald Trump, in approaching the Iran conflict, has indeed been dumb. Right. First, though, we'll go to our good friend Steve Witkoff. We have heard that the Iranians have received intelligence from the Russians, helping them target American assets. I've shown you this already in my hits and losses. I just have to show it again for this video.
Do we think that the Russians have shared intelligence about the location of U.S. military assets? And if they have, why would we be giving waivers on Russian oil sanctions?
Well, I'm not an intel officer, so I can't tell you. I can tell you that yesterday on the call with the president, the Russians said that they have not been sharing. That's what they said. So, we can take them at their word, but they did say that. And yesterday morning,
we can take them at their word, but they did say that. We can take them at their word.
Well, and yesterday morning, independently, Jared and I had a call with Ushakov, who reiterated the same. So
Oh, that's great. Oh, Ushakov's told you. Oh, okay. Have you ever heard of inductive reasoning? Inductive reasoning is what we use, when we're trying to understand form for giving us a sense of what might happen going forward. For example, if the Russians have deceived us, I don't know, let's say 100 times out of the last, I don't know, let's say 100 times, then on the 101st time, are we justified in thinking that they won't deceive us? Now, it's not impossible. Inductive reasoning, as set out by Hume and others, was this idea that, well, the problem with inductive reasoning can be exemplified with the black swan analogy, right? The idea that all swans we've ever known have been white, therefore, all swans are white, is an incorrect inference, because actually making that extra step to say all swans are white is problematic, because it might be that there are black swans. Lo and behold, there are black swans, right? So, every time the Russians say something doesn't mean they're going to lie every time. However, when you're talking about intelligence and the Russian support of Iran, and when you have had your intelligence entities like the CIA and military intelligence tell you that the Russians are providing Iran with intelligence, then going, well, Ushakov's told me and Putin's told us on the phone, we've been told twice, so I think we can take them at their word. You are an idiot. You're an idiot, Steve Witkoff.
that's a better question for the intel people, but
well, listen to the bloody intel people, you douche. Don't listen to Ushakov. Like, that's a question for the intelligence people. We'll go and ask them. I didn't realize I was going to get this angry so soon. Like, honestly, if Trump is listening to him and Jared Kushner to get his sense of what's going on in the war, then, the US is in serious, serious trouble. So Gandalf here reports, Brian Cunningham says, if this is accurate, this is the second time in days that Iran and their proxies hit the exact location of the CIA station alleged in two different US facilities. This is not an accident. It's coming from Russia, and Witkoff and company are blowing it off. Despicable. So reports are emerging that Iran and its proxies have now twice struck what are alleged to be CIA positions inside US facilities in two separate locations within days of each other. And the precision of these strikes has raised serious questions about the source of the intelligence behind them, with fingers pointing toward Russia. Meanwhile, US Envoy Steve Witkoff and his team appear to be downplaying the incidents entirely. And then we have this big news from NPWCNN. So this is Nick Patton Walsh. Russia is giving Iran specific advice on drone tactics, according to Western intelligence sources. Quote from the article, Russia is helping Iran with advanced drone tactics from its war in Ukraine to hit US and Gulf nation targets in the Middle East, according to Western intelligence official. Shahed drones designed by Iran but mass-produced by Moscow for use in Ukraine have been unexpectedly successful in penetrating the air defenses in the Gulf region nations. Russian intelligence sharing with Iran has until now been reported as general assistance with targeting, but specific tactical advice is a new level of support. Quote, what was more general support is now getting more concerning, including UAS, that's drone, targeting strategies that Russia employed in Ukraine, said the official, who did not want to be identified, discussing sensitive intelligence. While the official declined to specify the exact tactical help, Russia has used Shahed drones against Ukraine in waves, with multiple drones flying together and changing course regularly to elude air defenses. Ukraine's President Zelensky said on Twitter on Wednesday that, quote, Russia has started supporting the Iranian regime with drones. It will definitely help with missiles, and it is also helping them with air defense. Kiev sent some drone interception experts to the Gulf region. Okay, so here we have, okay, fair enough, it's an unknown intelligence source, but we have from multiple sources that has been confirmed by people like CBS and other news sources that Russia is supplying intelligence to the Iranians, which has been dismissed by Caroline Nevin, dismissed by Donald Trump, been dismissed by Steve Witkoff. So when I say, I'm going to show you that Donald Trump is dumb, in the context of JD Vance, the vice president, saying, hey, this time's different because all the other times we went to war abroad, our presidents were dumb, but now we've got Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is getting his intelligence from, wait for it.
The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me. Marco, so involved.
Oh, right. So Jared's told you, and your good friend Steve Witkoff, you know, your golfing buddy, and Pete Hegseth. So you got two people with Jewish background, or two Jewish people. You've got a Christian nationalist. These people siding with Israel in this strike against a Muslim country, so they're not going to be biased at all. And you got Marco Rubio, whose soul has evaporated over the last couple of months, so he's surely going to be holding the fort for a rational thought there. Just wondering if anyone's really actually spoken to intelligence experts. I mean, Pete Hegseth's too busy stuffing his face with lobsters and crab's legs from the $93 billion he spanked in the month of September 2025. You know, grifting off the back of defense expenditure, no doubt. I mean, Donald Trump is getting his advice on going to war from absolute idiots. But JD Vance, you're right. Yeah, no, all the other presidents were dumb. This one, though, he's not dumb. Right, I get it.
That I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And the situation,
just like, oh, I think it's just like, oh, I was going to go to the shops at 2:00, and then I just thought it might rain, so I went up at 1:30 instead. Just a bit. I went half an hour early because, you know, I thought it's going to rain. Also, just before that, I went to war with Iran and just blew up loads of stuff because my mates told me it's a good idea. Yeah, so there is that. What's the world coming to? Now, we have MS Now reporting that the story says, Anne Applebaum suggests that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner bungled the negotiations with Iran because they don't understand nuclear technology. Oh, right. So the guys that Donald Trump was depending on to provide him with information about whether to attack Iran don't understand, and we've heard this from the Gulf states, right? So we've heard from the Gulf states that Steve Witkoff didn't understand the nuclear stuff and then misinformed Trump. We've heard this from Ukraine as well, that Steve Witkoff didn't understand the Russian position and mischaracterized it, and basically the guy is wholly unfit for the job of being the person responsible for peace negotiations in two major conflicts. My goodness, as if he's not busy enough. He's got two major conflicts to sort out in the middle of trying to play enough golf to keep Trump happy. Nuclear experts undercut White House claims about Iran reactor at the heart of the case for war. Trump administration sent negotiators without nuclear expertise to lead talks on Iran's enrichment program. Now its public case for war centers on a facility that experts say it cannot do what officials claim. Oh, there was a great, I've got to find it. I've got to find this. Ezra Klein was interviewing someone on the constitutional justification for the war in Iran, who is an advisor to Trump, and is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Here it is. Found it. Okay, so where are we? You got to listen to this. This is fabulous. Ezra Klein here, speaking to a Trump advisor who says that basically it's fine to go to war without Congress, and then Ezra Klein reads out the Constitution, and she's like, and there's silence.
Congress does not have a constitutional role in the declaration of war. Congress has a role in cutting off funds for wars, which it has threatened to do. The president doesn't have to get permission, but yes, you can debate, you can decide, that's his choice and how he wants to do it.
I mean, here I will quote the Constitution: the Congress shall have power to declare war.
I'm going to play that again. I just love the silence. You've just said that Congress has no role in the declaration of war, right? Okay. I'm just going to read the Constitution.
Constitution, the Congress shall have power to declare war, grant letters of marque and
Brilliant.
reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water.
I think
The president shall be the commander-in-chief of the army, but it is Congress that has the power to declare war.
so. Constitutionally, the Constitution says Congress has the power to declare war, but the issue is whether or not a president who deploys military force abroad needs to do so only after having Congress declare war. Their argument.
So then she moves the goalpost and says, well, actually, okay, they can declare war, but can the president do it only after they've constitutionally kind of enacted their powers there to declare war? And it's just like, oh, really? My goodness. Anyway, back to where we were. So essentially relying on Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to be competent enough to understand the intricacies of the nuclear situation is possibly problematic. Just 36 hours before the United States opened its military assault, Iran's nuclear negotiators, along with Oman's foreign minister as mediator, presented the US with a 7-page proposal for a potential nuclear deal, according to US negotiator Steve Witkoff. But the American negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, who, according to a senior Middle East diplomat with knowledge of the talks, chose not to include nuclear technical experts in the negotiations, balked at Iran's request to continue using 20% enriched uranium at the reactor, a facility for civilian nuclear development, and the US first built and provided to Iran in 1967. Quote, the claim that they were using a research reactor to do good for the Iranian people was a complete and false pretense to hide the fact that they were stockpiling there, a senior Trump administration official told reporters during a briefing on Tuesday, 3 days after the attacks began. But the Trump administration has yet to provide evidence or intelligence to the public or to Congress demonstrating that Iran intended to use the uranium at the Tehran research reactor for weapon development, or that the facility was being covertly used for stockpiling purposes. In 2 classified briefings provided to lawmakers since the attacks, administration officials made no assertion that the reactor was being used for stockpiling purposes for a potential weapon, according to 2 people familiar with their comments, so on and so forth. So the Trump administration are mischaracterizing the situation. They are essentially, I would say, lying about what's been going on there, and the US position is against what the International Atomic Energy Agency states as well, by the way, and the US position is to contradict the IAEA and other experts, but without providing any evidence, right, and then going to war. But they've gone to war because, as I keep saying, Netanyahu phoned them up and asked them to come to war, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm not doing anything today." So I mean, I've got to play a bit of golf later, but before that, I think we can probably go to war. So that was that. Oh, but hang on, Benjamin. Just before that, Jared, Steve, are we okay to go to war? No, with Iran. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah, Benjamin. Yeah, that's fine. No, they said fine. They said apparently something about nuclear, but they weren't really listening in the meeting, so they reckon it's all right. Because basically they say Iran are just bastards that are just about to nuke us. Okay, sure thing. See you later. That's really what's going on. And then New York Times here. How Trump and his advisors miscalculated Iran's response to war. In the lead up to US-Israeli attack, President Trump downplayed the risks to the energy markets as a short-term concern, and that should not overshadow the mission to decapitate the Iranian regime. So now we've got energy spiking. We've got the Straits of Hormuz effectively being shut down, although not to Chinese tankers apparently turning their transponders off. There are tankers that are still getting out and getting to China. So China are getting their some of their oil. Iran is making sure that happens. All very, very interesting. So yeah, Trump ignored warnings that Iran could retaliate across the region and stop oil shipments. And now with energy markets in chaos, some aides are pessimistic about the lack of strategy to end the war, but they haven't told Trump. So the problem here is that the damage being done to the global economy, to the world, really, the damage being done to the world as a result of this war overshadows the benefit of the US going to war and doing what they've done with Israel. So yes, they have destroyed Iran's military capabilities, but certainly in the short term, we can speculate about the long term, but there are so many unknowns. But in the short term, right now, the war has hurt the world more than it has benefited the world. And that is a result of poor planning and a lack of understanding and not relying on experts. This is what happens when you don't send academics. Adam Kinzinger said this morning. He said, it turns out there is a role for academics, because if you send someone who's just a bloody golfing buddy and real estate magnate to try and sort out two wars, turns out he's completely incapable of doing so. Oh, look, experts are useful sometimes because, who knew? They know what they're talking about because, they're experts in the subjects. What a timeline we're living in when this gargantuan, moldy toenail of a human being gets to dictate the future of the world based on listening to a bunch of golf buddies and the living exemplar of nepotism. Oh, it's all right. Jared told me this, so it's going to be fine. Let's do it. Whoop-de-woo. That's the timeline we're living in. Kobisi letter here says Iran says that they're switching from reciprocal hits to continuous strikes and warns that they will drive oil prices to $200 a barrel per Reuters. Way! Benefit for the world, that is, isn't it? Benefit for, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you who, Putin and Russia. Details include 1, Iran says that the US will not be able to control oil prices. 2, quote, we won't allow even 1 litre of oil to reach the US, Israel and its partners. 3, quote, any vessel or tanker bound to them will be a legitimate target. 4, Iran appears to be shifting their military strategy as oil prices have declined. US oil prices are now nearing $90 a barrel again. They don't care about the price of oil, right? Iran, they know the price of oil will hurt the US and its allies. This is going to hurt Europe. This is going to hurt the United States. So we'll do it. We'll bomb the crap out of any kind of bit of oil infrastructure we can possibly strike. And then you see like videos like this and you wonder whether how reliable this is. Have the attacks been able to hit these bunkers? I don't know, but they're releasing the Iranians these sorts of bits of footage. So this is a tunnel within which there are, by the looks of it, a whole bunch of, actually, are these attack boats? They look like they're manned boats rather than unmanned boats. But anyway, this is just a tunnel full of mines and boats. I presume those are mines. Not really sure. They look like they could be unmanned surface vehicles. So it does look like there are drone boats there. And as you can see, these just go on and on. There are huge numbers of these. We've seen these with tunnels full of Shahed drones and all sorts. Here we get some of these speedboats firing off these missiles. Will we see these in action? I don't know. There's going to be a good deal of propaganda coming out from the Iranians as they try and fight their corner. Gandalf says to trap, the Iranian regime has released footage of underground naval tunnels packed with fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, naval mines. Something tells me they did not build this last week. The Islamic Republic had 40 years to prepare for this moment, 40 years of tunnels, proxies, missiles, and patience. And now the United States is being pulled deeper and deeper into exactly the war Iran strategists spent 4 decades designing. Jared Kushner thought they were not ready. It's scary stuff, isn't it? Chris Owicki, Iran is using a unique type of loitering self-targeting surface-to-air missile to shoot down US MQ-9 Reaper drones. 11 Reapers costing over $330 million have so far been reported destroyed in the war with Iran. So that's this particular type of missile. It's not really important. We don't need to go into that. But the point is that the US is losing stuff. There are over 140 injured US soldiers or service personnel. There are 8 who have died, and I think they've lost a whole bunch of THAAD radars. They're having to bring in THAADs and patriots from South Korea, which is highly controversial. And then let's listen to a couple of senators who have been involved in some more closed-door briefings, and they are not happy.
I just came from a 2-hour closed-door classified briefing on the war. It just confirmed to me it's totally incoherent. We are not going to be able to achieve any of our stated objectives. But I mention it because it's another closed-door briefing. We have still not yet heard a full explanation as to why this is necessary. We still have had no hearings in front of Congress that the public can see. And I think that's pretty simple, because if the president did what the Constitution says, come to Congress to get authorization for this war, he wouldn't get it. Because the American people would demand that their member of Congress, their senator, whether they be a Republican or Democrat, vote no, because this is a disaster of epic proportions. It's already getting Americans killed. It's driving up prices here at home. Harder line leadership, more antithetical to U.S. interests, are strengthening inside Iran. And there's really no way that we're going to be able to destroy their nuclear program, because most of it is buried underground, unless we mount a ground invasion, which would be even more disastrous and more unpopular. This has just been a debacle, a 10-day debacle. And we're going to use whatever leverage we have in the Senate to try to prompt those hearings, to try to prompt that vote, and to get this administration to start paying attention to the Constitution.
Okay, so that was Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut. So he lays out here, he shares maybe, so what he learned from this, maybe the lead is that the war goals do not involve destroying Iran's nuclear weapons program. This is surprising, since Trump says over and over this is a key goal. But then, of course, we already know airstrikes can't wipe out their nuclear material. Second, they confirmed regime change is also not on the list. So all of these different reasons we were initially given for the war, taking out the nukes, regime change, those two didn't feature at all in the classified briefing. So they are going to spend hundreds of billions of your taxpayer dollars while a whole bunch of them get a whole bunch of Americans killed, and a hardline regime, probably a more anti-American hardline regime, will still be in charge. Okay, so what are the goals? It seems primarily destroying lots of missiles and boats and drone factories. This is exactly what I've said, right? I've told you that you will see developing an objective that is the narrowest objective, just blowing up stuff. That's what I said yesterday and the day before. As they realize they can't achieve regime change, they can't achieve denuclearizing the denuclearization of Iran without boots. Neither of those can be achieved, without boots on the ground. Then it comes to just blowing up stuff from a distance, and then once you've run out of missiles and run out of targets, that's done. We'll walk away and call it a success. That's what it's going to be, and this is what Chris Murphy's saying. So what are the goals? It seems primarily destroying lots of missiles and boats and drone factories. But the question that stumped them, what happens when you stop bombing and they restart production? They hinted at more bombing, which is, of course, an endless war. So they asked the question, okay, right, you've blown up all the Iranian stuff, then what? When they start rebuilding it all? Keep bombing them, right? So when JD Vance said, this time it'll be different because we're not dumb, right? What part of this, what part of what you've told us here indicates that you are not dumb as a bag of rocks? Like, what part of this shows that you guys know what you're doing? Oh, none of it. Right. Okay. Got it. Jobs are good. Chris Murphy says, and on the Strait of Hormuz, they had no plan. I can't go into more detail about how Iran gums up the strait, but suffice it to say, right now, they didn't know how to get it safely back open, which is unforgivable because this is part of the disaster. This part was 100% foreseeable. If you knew what you were doing, if you planned this war carefully, you would know they would do this in the Strait of Hormuz. That you didn't plan for that is absolutely freaking criminal. An ashen-faced Blumenthal came out of the same briefing And he said, I've never seen anything like this in the 15 years I've been in the Senate.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate.
Sorry, it's not that loud.
Left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war.
So he's angrier than he's ever been after any briefing for 15 years. And he's particularly unhappy about the cost of the war. Latest I'm hearing, it's at least $2 billion a day. He is just flabbergasted at what he learned, what he didn't learn.
My questions have been unanswered. And I will demand answers because the American people deserve to know. And I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here. And there is also, as disturbingly as anything else, the specter of active Russian aid to Iran, putting in danger American lives. Literally, Russia seems to be aiding our enemy.
And Blumenthal here on the money. Russia is aiding our enemy.
Actively and intensively with intelligence and perhaps with other means. And China also.
I'm really struggling with the sound on this one because apparently my volume booster, which works for me, doesn't work for you. So if I do a 600% volume booster, apparently this doesn't affect you.
May be assisting.
Much louder for me.
So the American people deserve to know much more than this administration has told them about the cost of the war, the danger to our sons and daughters in uniform, and the potential for further escalation and widening of this war, a war of choice made by this president, not chosen by the American people, with potentially huge consequences.
War of choice, that choice was not made by the American people, it was made by Donald Trump, and it may have huge consequences. It appears to be no planning, it's dangerous, just poorly thought through. Lindsey Graham, on the other hand, is totally gung-ho about everything, saying that, well, you'll hear here.
Now, President Trump, thank God he was there. He's the right guy at the right time. And when he heard they were that close to 10 weapons, he acted. And you know what? When this is over, we're going to obliterate their nuclear program, and there's going to be a new dawn in the Mideast. President Trump, you did the right thing. God bless you. And Steve and Jared, you literally saved the world from terrorism.
Steve and Jared, you literally saved the world from terrorism. When this is over, he said, we're going to obliterate their nuclear program. Is that the same one that you claimed that they had obliterated last year? Is that same one? I'm asking for a friend, really. They would just ask me earlier whether that was the case. And I just, I'm not putting you under pressure. Take your time, Lindsay. Just wondering. Because it seems like you don't know what you're talking about. Now, good to see here. I won't play you this, but you've got Republican Senator John Kennedy actually coming out on CNN and admitting the right thing, which is that tomahawk that hit the school. He said, I think it's the truth. I'm not going to hide behind that. It was terrible, terrible mistake. I wish it hadn't happened. I'm sorry it happened. I can assure you it wasn't intentional. When you make a mistake, you ought to admit it. That is a breath of fresh air, rather than Trump claiming that the Iranians had tomahawk missiles, etc., etc. Absolutely ridiculous, of course. Right, moving on. So the Strait of Hormuz, 3 cargo ships were attacked in the Persian Gulf overnight per UK MTO alerts. 2 suffered damage and the 3rd is ablaze with the crew abandoning the ship. This is after Donald Trump, remember, said, come on, captains, have some guts. Grow a pair and go through the Strait of Hormuz. You'll be fine, said Trump. These captains need to have more guts. The reason he said that is because the US has no way of securing those ships through the strait. And this is what Chris Murphy was saying. There was no plan. There is no plan for this. Thai captain, okay, sir, I'll do that. I'll do what Trump tells me. Nobody knows ship safety like you. His ship buggered. Right, thanks for that, Trump. Thanks for that. Okay, interesting infographic here. Asian nations rely more on energy imports from the Strait of Hormuz than Europe, the US, or Oceania. But what I think you need to understand, I'm no expert here, but I assume it all goes on the open market. So even though China and South Korea and Japan and India get their oil here much more than Europe and the US, it will affect the price. So if they can't get their stuff from Iran or from the Strait of Hormuz, from the Middle East, then they'll be buying it on the open market, in which case they'll be competing with Europe and the US for open market oil. And even in the US, if you're drilling your own stuff, if you've got because you're not a state-owned actor, like, it means that you sell it on the open market. So even the US, like your private entities will be like, well, China are offering us twice as much as the Americans are offering us, so we're going to drill the stuff in the US and then sell it to the Chinese, unless you bring in some regulation against that. So, you know, yes, that may be the case, but, you know, don't think that it won't affect all other nations. Yeah, global availability is supply and demand. Global availability determines price. You say it in 4 words, where I'd take 400 words. There you go. That's why my videos are so long. Right. So there is that issue. But again, you know, evidence that the US really didn't plan this well. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Iran is exporting more oil through the Strait of Hormuz than before the war, showing it's in control of a strategic waterway that is closed off to the rest of the region's oil producers. I don't know the details of this, but there are claims that actually they are still getting oil out, and it's going to predominantly, we understand, the Chinese are getting quite a bit of oil still from that neck of the woods. Now, talking about the Chinese, we have the situation of the new Iranian leader. Trump has said that that leader is unacceptable because, of course, Donald Trump gets to decide what leaders are elected or put in place in any given nation. That's his choice and his choice alone, right? The Chinese have said, I mean, we can all disagree with, I disagree with dictatorships, but what I would never do is dictate from my foreign point of view who should be leader there. At the most, you try and nurture democracy and democratic mechanisms and ideals in any given country so that they can self-determine. Trump here says the new Iranian leader is unacceptable. Then China responded by saying, quote, "The decision was made according to the Iranian constitution, not based on Washington's approval rating." Ouch. That's got to hurt. Now, I've long said that Stephen Miller is the guy behind everything going on in the American administration. Here is Tom Tillis, able to say these sorts of things now as a very experienced Republican senator, because he's now retiring, right? This is what happens. You see this from Representative Don Bacon from Nebraska. You see it from Marjorie Taylor Greene when she said she is going to resign. You see it from Tom Tillis. They become much more critical when they know they've got nothing to lose in terms of their elected position.
One of your points of contention with Secretary Noem was her handling of the aftermath of those fatal ICE shootings of 2 American citizens, specifically how she jumped to conclusions before their deaths had been investigated, calling them domestic terrorists. I do want to play for you how Senator Mullen reacted just hours after Alex Preddy was shot and killed.
A deranged individual that came in to cause max damage with a loaded pistol with an extra mag that was completely loaded, was shot and killed. How much more does this got to go on before the Democrat leaders there take responsibility for their words?
So obviously there's no evidence that Alex Peretti was deranged or that he came to cause maximum damage with a loaded pistol he had a license to carry, or that any Democratic leader was responsible for this tragedy. Does that give you any pause?
It gives me pause that you had people like Stephen Miller calling the shots that actually I believe that maybe Kristi Noem acted on. It was Stephen Miller that was talking about a terrorist brandishing a gun. It was Stephen Miller who said it was the position of the United States that we should go after Greenland. It's Stephen Miller that's been repeatedly responsible for embarrassments for the president of the United States by acting too quickly, speaking first and thinking later. I think if Mark Wayne I don't think Mark Wayne goes to the podium and repeats something that Stephen Miller says. I think Stephen Miller's demonstrated he too is out of his depth, and I think Mark Wayne will learn from that.
Do you think Stephen Miller should go?
Oh, of course I do. I think Stephen Miller is one of the. Not only does Stephen really want to just paint a picture, he's not worried about substance, more worried about form, but I also think that he has an outsized influence over the operations of the cabinet. And I believe we've got qualified cabinet members there that sometimes are doing less than what they want to because of his direction and his outsized influence. He's a big problem in this administration. He has been from the beginning.
Honestly, what Tom Tillis is saying here, as a Republican, is possibly one of the most important things a Republican has said in the last year. It's this: Stephen Miller is the problem.
But Noem is a Senate-confirmed cabinet member. She should have been independent. I believe that Mark Wayne will be independent. I believe that Mark Wayne will be driven by data. He'll leverage law enforcement resources, expertise, people like Tom Holman to get things right. And if he doesn't, we'd hold him accountable. But I have a lot of confidence in my friend, and I'm looking forward to him getting this department under control so that Republicans can seize an issue that helped us get elected. Strong on the border, strong on deportation, strong on the rule of law.
What? It's a breath of fresh air there, but you know, I wish it wouldn't be the case that you only hear that when people decide that they are going to resign or retire. Now, I need to check this somewhat, so pinch of salt and everything. It's now the G6, not the G7. The USA now supports Russia. The European Commission is demanding that the US comply with the sanctions imposed by the G7 against Russian oil in particular and price cap on the oil. This was stated by the European Commissioner for Economics, Valdis Dombrovskis. According to Reuters, quote, "It is very important to strictly adhere to the price cap introduced by the G7 and possibly to move towards a complete ban on maritime transport in order to limit Russia's military revenues, because the opposite would be doomed to failure," he said. Time to accept the G7 is no more, is now the G6. Is it the case that the G7, that the US is not adhering to the agreements of the G7 to restrict Russian oil? You know, is the US just taking itself out of any form of alliance? The UN going to take ourselves out of that and create our own version of border peace? I reported some months back that one of the ideas for the Trump administration was to replace the G7 actually with the most populous nations on earth. So the idea that you would have, I think, India, China, was it Brazil, and so, some of these other countries, and that's who the US wanted to have as this kind of group of countries to hang out together. So it's really worrying development there if that's the case. Now we're going to go to the UK. I love a bit of the House of Commons, right? It is great, and it's very performative. But what we've seen, and I went through this yesterday with you, is the U-turn from both the Conservatives and Reform, the two right-wing parties in the UK, that have then looked at they've read the tea leaves, they looked at public polling, and they said, okay, going to war in support of the US against Iran is not publicly popular, so we're going to do a U-turn and change our position on that. Then Wednesday is the day of Prime Minister's questions. So today is Wednesday. We have Prime Minister's questions where you have a set amount of questions to the Prime Minister and he then answers it, and then there's a bit of back and forth. And it was a packed House of Commons today, and you can see, I am going to play this to you.
As I said to the House last week, I took the decision that we should not join the initial US-Israeli offensive against Iran. The leader of the opposition attacked me for that decision relentlessly. She said that the UK should have joined the US and Israel in the initial offensive strikes. Mr. Speaker, then yesterday, in the wake of the economic consequences, the leader of the opposition totally abandoned her position. She told the BBC, "I never said we should join." She told the BBC, "I haven't said we should have gone in with the United States." That is the mother of all U-turns on the single most important decision a Prime Minister ever has to take, whether to commit the United Kingdom to war or not.
Mr. Speaker, I think the mother of all U-turns is him saying that they're not increasing fuel duty. That is
just to give you some context, and I was listening to some analysis of Prime Minister's questions. She had a very bad time at PMQs and didn't do at all a very good job, and was focusing on fuel duty, which has been frozen until I think September or something, which is absolutely right. We need to wait. So, you know, tax on fuel. We need to wait to understand what's going on with this war. There's, you know, she's focusing on just the wrong thing rather than the war. But anyway, so that's what she's talking about, as if this is the mother of all issues.
news to us because last week the Chancellor stood up and said the fuel duty was going to increase in September. The Prime Minister told us at the start of the year that the cost of living was his #1 priority. So can he explain how a rise in fuel duty helps with the cost of living?
Mr. Speaker, fuel duty is frozen. It's going to remain frozen until September, and we will keep the situation under review in light of what's happening in Iran. But, Mr. Speaker, the most important issue is de-escalating the situation. And I come back to the leader of the opposition's position, because this is one of the most important decisions a Prime Minister or leader of the opposition ever has to take, whether to commit your country to war. The day after the initial US-Israeli strike started, her shadow foreign secretary said that the US-Israeli initial attacks were absolutely right, and it is a position my party supports. She said, why has the Prime Minister not actually worked with America to be much more proactive? Last Wednesday, leader of the opposition. We are in this war whether we like it or not. What is the Prime Minister waiting for? Then yesterday she says, I never said, I know they don't want to hear it. I know they don't. I wouldn't want to hear it if I were them. After all that, she said...
Order. Enough is enough. I can't hear it. Who wants to lead the first ones out? Right, we'll have a little bit more silence, Prime Minister.
So after 9 days of saying, join the war, join the war, join the war, yesterday she says, I never said we should join. I haven't said we should go in with the US. I'll tell you what's happened, Mr. Speaker. She and the Reform leader have been spooked because they realise they've jumped into supporting a war without thinking through the consequences. And now she's furiously trying to backpedal.
100%. So anyway, I just thought I'd give you a little taster of that. And it came up again later. This one's a lot shorter, where he's taking aim at both Reform and the Tories here.
I'm not going to take lectures from someone who says we should join the war, and a week later says, can I change my mind? I got that wrong. It is deeply embarrassing. And she's not the only one. Mr. Speaker, last week, she's not the only one, the leader of Reform. We should be part of this with the US and the Israelis. We have to get rid of the regime. We should do all we can to support the operation. I make that perfectly clear, he said. Until yesterday, screeching U-turn, we shouldn't get ourselves involved in another foreign war. Two parties packed with failed Tories, led by leaders who are not fit to be Prime Minister.
I love it. I love it. And they both are packed with failed Tories, quite literally. So anyway, Robert Jenrick then goes on another TV show. He's from Reform and then he's put under pressure because of the U-turn and the difference in opinion between, you know, people in Reform. What is Reform's position on Iran war? Sophie Ridge challenges Jenrick on the issue and reads out how some of the party members have commented, including the leader Nigel Farage, so embarrassing him, I think, there. Aaron Bastani here says there's a Farage quote that she reads out a bunch of quotes that put him in a difficult position from his own party. But the Farage quote that's even better is, quote, "We should do all we can to support the operation. Gloves need to come off. We need to accept that we are part of this with the Americans and Israelis. We have to get rid of this regime." So Reform. So what's interesting, it's really important to note here, is that Reform are arguing on regime change, which is not, we have now heard from the closed briefing that regime change is not part of the remit anymore. So Reform are saying we should join the Americans in this war because we need to do regime change. But the Americans themselves are saying we're not doing regime change anymore. Then that should be deeply embarrassing for Nigel Farage. But of course, like Donald Trump, has the inability to feel embarrassment, shame, and contrition. At the same time, we have Kemi Badenoch again saying that Keir Starmer, she often calls him not here Keir. I've heard this, I think, from members of my family, right, talking about Keir Starmer is never here. He should be sorting out things back in the UK. And this is what Kemi Badenoch said when he was off at G7 and NATO, doing things on behalf of the UK internationally, but also making sure that the world is operating in a way that's aligned to what the UK wants. This is what she says.
We have HMS Dragon in Portsmouth right now. France has sent about 10 ships. The president of France is in Cyprus. HMS Dragon is still in Portsmouth a week after I was asking the Prime Minister why he hadn't left. That's shocking. Who's looking after our servicemen?
So you don't think it would hurt you in the polls?
I don't think that anyone is asking about what I'm doing because I'm not the Prime Minister. What they're asking is why the Prime Minister is not out there making sure that our troops are protected. What they are saying is that I'm the person who's speaking up for them.
So she's saying, why isn't the Prime Minister out in Cyprus? Emmanuel Macron's out in Cyprus. Hang on, last time you were saying, why is he out in the G7 and why is he out at NATO? Like, make your mind up. Is he supposed to be abroad or not? Because when he was out at G7 and NATO, it's to stop stuff like this from happening, right? But now it's like happening. You're like, now he needs to go and do some performative thing in Cyprus. Okay, just sure. And also, if HMS Dragon, you said I would have sent HMS Dragon out last week. What, without weapons and not ready? Right, so you would have said our warship that's ready, you know, one that is able to deal with the aerial threats, you would send it out when it wasn't operationally ready to be sent out. Just making sure that you understand that what you're advocating for is something that is absolutely insane. But there you go. That's you know, as someone else says here, Jessica Earlgott says, Badenoch said if she was Prime Minister, HMS Dragon would have left a week ago, presumably with its doors hanging off and no weapons on board. Like, honestly, what a muppet. And then I think the final one from Prime Minister's question here, I've got, I don't think, yeah, so this is a criticism. So there's a lot of controversy going on in the UK at the moment because Kemi Badenoch said our Air Force is just hanging around at the moment. The implication they're hanging around doing nothing, whereas they should be out there in the Middle East helping with the war. And this was incredibly controversial because, as many people pointed out, they're not just hanging around. They're like shooting drones down. They're on operations all over the shop. There's overstretch, right? They're the opposite of just hanging around. Our RAF, we don't have enough of them, and they are operating beyond their means.
But in relation to those that are taking the action to defend us, what does she say? Just hanging about. Just hanging about. That's how she described our pilots in the region. Let me tell you what they've been doing. Flying sorties in 7 of the 10 countries in the region day and night, taking out incoming strikes, protecting the lives of others whilst risking their own. If she had any decency, she'd get up and she would apologise.
Mr. Speaker. Oh, hang on. I think they should wait for it. Mr. Speaker, I have never criticized our armed forces. I have criticized him.
Order. Mr. Swallow, you're going out. I've had enough. Week in, week out. I believe no real name.
Mr. Speaker.
I love the fact it's like a school teacher. You out. Go and stand in the corner. You're being too noisy. I've had enough of you. Mr. Swallow, out.
I have never criticized our armed forces. I am criticizing him and his decisions. And let me remind the House, Mr. Speaker, about his record on the armed forces.
So, Mr. Speaker, no apology to our pilots who are risking their lives. And I'm not going to take lectures from. I'm not going to take lectures from someone who says we should join the war, and a week later says, "Can I change my mind? I got that wrong." It is deeply embarrassing, and she's not the only one.
And that's where it kicks into that one that you've heard. So yeah, and I mean, part of the issue here is that under the previous Conservative government, there was a massive underfunding of the armed forces, which kind of has put us in a situation where we don't have the ships available to go and do what we want them to do. We do not have enough ready ships. It's just, we don't have enough ships. We don't have enough personnel. 14 years of chronic underfunding. I've explained this before that, you know, it's somewhat understandable given the peace dividend, right? And so you'd rather spend money on things like education and whatnot. But the reality is that was a conservative 14-year conservative tenure. And since the Cold War, our armed forces have been halved. So, and that's successive governments. But yeah, here's Ed Davey, who's a leader of the Lib Dems, agreeing actually with the Labour here in criticising Badenoch and Farage.
This week, families across the country have seen petrol prices rise at the pump, mortgage rates go up, and fixed energy deals get more expensive, all because of a war they did not start and do not support. The leader of the Conservatives has been competing with the Honourable Member for Clacton to be Donald Trump's biggest cheerleader. And the Prime Minister was right to reject their costly warmongering.
And he goes on to ask another question, but I mean that's interesting. You know, these are the two biggest cheerleaders of Donald Trump in the political landscape. Interesting that in the UK you got this oftentimes accusation that the cost of net zero is what sent up our energy prices. I've talked about marginal pricing previously, that ties our energy pricing to gas, which means if there's a spike in gas prices, even if renewables are cheaper, which they are, then we have to go on the price of the most expensive thing, which is gas. And so we need to change that. So we need to reform to our pricing structures and mechanisms. And there are a whole number of reasons why our energy prices in the UK are some of the highest in the world, if not the highest in the world, right? And for industry, we need to change that. So we definitely need reforms. Net zero, there will be a cost incurred of like trying to wean ourselves off fossil fuels, but it is not the cost that many on the right claim it is. And in fact, there's been a new report that's come out to say the cost of staying on fossil fuels is actually much higher than the cost of net zero, especially when you factor into account things like a war in the Middle East. So the cost of clean energy transition is less than the entire cost of the last fossil fuel crisis. A further reminder that politicians on the right who want to abandon our drive for clean power want to saddle our country with huge costs and risks. So there is a report that's come out. I need to read it. Now, another interesting thing before we go and look at the European side of things, Rory Stewart here reacting to the Royal United Services Institute, a military think tank from the UK, that says it is unclear why the UK should divert scarce resources from Europe that would neither be decisive nor influence a mercurial US administration that does not need them. Rory Stewart says absolutely, although it was also unclear why the US itself is diverting scarce resources from Europe and the Asia Pacific to this operation. So this is a really important point. Like, the first point is that why should Britain move military assets out to the Middle East when those assets are actually much more important positioned with regard to supporting Europe? Why are we supporting a mercurial American administration? Well, you could argue it's because it's then brought attacks on our air base and so on and so forth. But then Rory Stewart says, well, we can take that one step further. Why is the US moving scarce military resources out to the Middle East, pulling stuff from the Indo-Pacific, now pulling air defense systems that have been attrited in the Middle East from South Korea? They were really controversially put in South Korea, caused a massive issue between South Korea and China, having these THAAD systems put in South Korea. Huge controversy. America made it happen. And then as soon as that controversy's boiled over, they're pulling the THAADs back because they've been blown up in the Middle East. So it's all very controversial. Why did any of this need to happen? This is because Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller have the ear of Donald Trump, and Netanyahu together have convinced Donald Trump to do this ridiculous thing. You could build up a case to doing this war if you actually set up a rational, careful case that was also legally justified and constitutionally approved. Then you got a different matter, but there's no clarity. It's complete chaos. And yeah, there you go. Right, let's go to Europe, where hopefully we get a bit more sense. Let's listen to a bit of Pedro Sanchez, who talks here. I'm going to read this.
Let's build a true European.
Actually, he says it in English. So we have heard this a little bit from Emmanuel Macron. It's been an idea that's gathered much more momentum since the war in Ukraine. Now we've got Pedro Sanchez formally suggesting this.
Let's build a true European army, not in 10 years, but now. Spain will join with all the resources that are needed. Let's strengthen our multilateral system, reforming and empowering those institutions that, despite their flaws, have succeeded in maintaining peace in the West for decades.
Wow. Interesting that Spain is a country that's actually undergoing an economic boom at the moment. Some people are tying it to their energy situation, where they're not being screwed over by really high energy costs, tourism, all sorts of things. He's actually taken in a load of immigrants recently. I presume that's with half an eye on the economy as well, although some on the right will find that very controversial. It looks like Spain is although it underspends on defense and as a percentage of GDP concerning NATO, here you have Pedro Sanchez saying, well, I guess it's almost like we don't need NATO because we advocate for setting up our own European army. Very, very interesting. Pedro Sanchez here, this is not in English though, so I'm just going to read you what is written here. In a bombshell interview, Spain's Pedro Sanchez has launched a direct, unprecedented assault on the heart of global power. Quote, "We must end the right to veto in the United Nations Security Council." He accused Russia and the US of bringing a lot of instability to the world. And this is absolutely on point. We definitely need to reform the UN. That Security Council setup is broken. It is not fit for purpose. And these large nations, like having the rotating presidency of the Security Council when you are Russia and you're committing an illegal war is anathema to me. It's an absolute insult to morality. Right, let's move on to what are we going to do? Hungary. That's it. So quite a bit on Hungary here. Quote from Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister. Viktor Orbán no longer hides his fondness for Putin and Russian politics. That is why Europe must effectively enforce its decisions, including on a 90 billion euro loan. Okay, lots happening on this 90 billion euro loan. At the moment, it's being held up for Ukraine by Hungary. And then if Hungary have a change of presidency, then Slovakia's Fico said, well, we'll take over the veto of that if Hungary changes its position. It's all over the Druzhba pipeline. Now you've had Baltic nations and Nordic nations come together and say, look, as an emergency stopgap, we can underwrite kind of bilaterally from all these nations, we can underwrite a 30 billion euro loan that will go to Ukraine. Ukraine can hold on, I think, without that until May. There's another 6 weeks They turns out they've got the ability to go on for 6 weeks longer than they thought they're done without like collapsing. I mean, Ukraine, it appears, are in desperate straits. They need money to continue to function. They're absolutely screwed. That 90 billion was fundamental, and because of the Druzhba pipeline, Hungary has just stopped that from happening. So Tusk here saying that is why Europe must effectively enforce its decisions, including that loan. Hungary has signed up for this decision. I'm convinced that Europe can safely use a 90 billion for Ukraine without waiting for additional approval from Budapest. We will not keep coming back to this issue just because Mr. Orbán is currently more favorably disposed towards Russia than Ukraine, said Tusk. Ouch. That is sorry, I didn't have that on the right screen, but that is a punch in the gut and it's a substantial gut, I have to say, for Mr. Orbán. So Donald Tusk standing up there for Ukraine. Likewise, Friedrich Merz, there is no reason to consider easing sanctions against Russia. We should not face a choice between maintaining sanctions and showing solidarity. Our position is clear. We stand with Ukraine and are prepared to endure such difficulties if necessary. Aid to Ukraine must not be interrupted. There's a real recognition among some of these leaders that Ukraine is that important. It's not seen as important at all by Trump, obviously, but for Europe, it is super important, and actually, therefore, for the world. Okay, now we are going more into Hungary directly. Peter, reports have been emerging that Russian military intelligence is assisting Viktor Orbán ahead of Hungary's parliamentary elections. I've mentioned this previously. Let's remind ourselves. According to a report by Deutsche Welle, opposition leader Peter Magyar claims officers from Russia's main directorate of the General Staff have arrived in Budapest to influence the vote scheduled for April the 12th. Quote, we demand an immediate cessation of foreign interference in the elections, Magyar said. If true, it would mark yet another example of GRU operations targeting democratic processes in Europe. It's a real concern. And you can see why Orbán and Russia are panicking, because here's another February median. So this is a decent poll. Another poll showing not just a 12-point lead or a 10-point lead, a 20-point lead for Tisha. The polls are speaking. Maybe it's time to say goodbye, Viktor. Well, maybe it's time to think that he's going to be cheating his way to victory. Peter Shihata's foreign minister says the EU should immediately lift its ban on Russian oil and gas imports with the war in the Middle East escalating and the Strait of Hormuz closed. A major share of global energy supply is now at risk. Europe is especially exposed because the EU had already banned Russian energy imports, he said. Now the conflict in the Middle East is cutting global supply as well. When supply shrinks, here he claims prices rise. Europe is therefore facing the risk of dramatic price increases. If Brussels keeps the sanctions in place, it will cause serious harm to European people and the European economy. The focus should be on protecting the interests of Europeans, not ideology. Interesting, he phrases it like that, because he's basically protecting Russian ideology, I think. Viktor Orbán himself adds, the Ukrainian oil blockade and the war in the Middle East are sending oil prices soaring. Europe must act today, I wrote to President Costa and Ursula von der Leyen, calling for the review and suspension of sanctions on Russian energy. Of course, he did. Hungarian delegation is also heading to Ukraine for talks regarding the Druzhba oil pipeline. State Secretary of the Ministry of Energy, Gabor Szepek, said in a video message from the border crossing there. So the Hungarians really gunning for the Druzhba pipeline to be reopened. I mean, I don't know. I'd love to know what's going on there, because part of me thinks open a pipeline if it's going to get you $90 billion euros of aid that you so desperately need. What evidently you would have thought 90 billion euros and the money that Hungary's stolen, by the way, 80 million in cash and all that gold, they'll get that back, you would have thought, although it pales into insignificance to 90 billion. Is oil going from Russia to Hungary that important? I mean, it is hugely important. But if you're weighing those things up, or is it a case of like, we are not giving into blackmail? be given to blackmail, then it rewards them for vetoing decisions. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I'd love to know. There must be more to the Druzhba pipeline thing, I think, than we understand. And I think that's probably why Europe's keeping quiet. We've heard that Europe has quietly been pressuring Ukraine to open the pipeline, that they said that they would pay for fixing it if indeed it has been destroyed by the Russians. I mean, yeah, so Tom, so here's the point. The way I understand it, I'm not fully on top of this, but the way I understand it is that Hungary and Slovakia have both contested the Ukrainian claim that Russia has damaged the pipeline, the Druzhba pipeline, so it cannot be used inside Ukraine. Then Fico said, we've got satellite imagery to show that the pipeline is not damaged. And I think Ukraine have said it's actually damaged inside, all the sensors have gone, all this technical stuff, blah, 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 blah. And you're thinking, that sounds a bit like, and I don't want to denigrate the Ukrainians, or not denigrate, but accuse the Ukrainians of something that I'm not sure of. But it could be the case that Ukraine really don't want it to be opened and are saying it's been blown up in Ukraine by the Russians. Then Slovakia and Hungary are saying, no, it hasn't. Give us the proof. They're saying, look, we'll send an independent set of surveyors in to look at the pipeline, but that's not being allowed. Europe has said we'll pay for it to be fixed, but they're not doing that. So if I'm to be super cynical, it looks like Ukraine is playing quite cutely here, and they are maybe claiming that it's destroyed when it's not. Although they have destroyed it north of the border, so you could just open it in Ukraine and then blow it up north of the border, but then you'll get back to the same leverage issue. So I don't know. I think there's certainly more to this than meets the eye. The claim from the Ukrainians is destroyed inside Ukraine, but I don't know that there's been any evidence provided that that is the case. Why would Ukraine open it? I mean, the reason would be to release the 90 billion euros. The idea is that that's being held up by Hungary because of the Druzhba pipeline. So that's why there's something more must be happening, because you'd assume that the 90 billion euros is worth way more than oil going to Hungary for Ukraine. But anyway, I don't know. You guys might have some other ideas here as well. Yeah, it's not just Hungary and Slovakia. The oil will flow to EU over them. Yeah. Right. I don't know. I must move on now because I can't read all the comments. And yeah, and the other thing is they could be waiting for the elections to take place at the beginning of April in Hungary, but that's why Slovakia Fico said even if Peter Magyar gets in and they release that funding, we'll then veto the funding from Slovakia. So I believe at the moment Slovakia haven't vetoed the 90 billion, but are willing to if the Druzhba pipeline is not opened. Anyway, I don't know. Something funky is going on there. There's more than meets the eye, I'm sure. Now, according to SZR, China is gradually winding down its activity in joint with Russia in joint Arctic projects due to the risk of Western sanctions, difficult logistics, and geopolitical tensions. No new large-scale initiatives have yet emerged, and one of the 6 joint projects has already been closed. This is interesting. So they're pulling back from doing so much close work with the Russians there. Timothy Milovanov the other day reported that a small logistics firm is quietly breaking Europe's sanctions on Russia. The Berlin-based shipping network moves banned goods to Moscow, disguised as postal parcels, exploiting loopholes in EU law. Reporters track packages with GPS from a German supermarket to Russia, according to Politico. The network revolves around LS Logistics Solution GmbH, a Köln-based firm founded by former staff of Ruspost. the German subsidiary of Russia's state postal service. Packages moved through a warehouse near Berlin airport, then by truck through Poland and Belarus to Russia. They mailed 5 parcels containing banned electronic components from Russian supermarkets in Berlin, declaring them as books and scarves. Employees were never inspected the contents and charged 13 euros per kilogram without receipts. The parcels were disguised as Uzbek mail. Instead of Russian postal labels, staff attached stickers from Uzpost, Uzbekistan's state postal service, which is not under EU sanctions. Uzpost said partners can use its delivery systems. Inside each parcel, journalists placed GPS trackers named Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and Epsi. The devices showed the packages moving through Berlin to a warehouse in Schönefeld, near the capital's airport, the hub of the shadow Russian postal network. From there, the parcels were loaded onto 40-ton trucks and driven east. They crossed Germany to Frankfurt, moved across Poland via the A2 motorway past Warsaw, Warszawa, then reached Belarus 2 days later, about 1,100 miles from Berlin. The shipment slipped through because international mail has special legal status. Postal packages face simplified export paperwork and are inspected mainly through risk-based checks, unlike cargo shipments that require full export declarations. Ukrainian sanctions envoy Vladyuk was not surprised. So on and so forth. Nobody's doing enough, etc., etc. They reached Moscow and St. Petersburg. Even after a decade of sanctions, banned European goods still find their way to Russia, one postal box at a time. Good investigative work there. That needs to stop. Right, let's focus a little bit on oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. A little bit on Poland. Just to let you know what's been happening in Poland, as far as I understand. Again, I only have a very veneer bit of knowledge on this. So you had the PIS, Law and Justice Party, which is essentially a kind of MAGA style right-wing populist party in Poland that were in power. Then they lost power, although I think they got the biggest vote, but they not enough for a majority. So a coalition formed with Donald Tusk's centrists and centre-right, and that coalition that formed to then take control. And then you had the presidential election where Nawrocki got in, unfortunately, and he was originally an independent but got kind of taken on by the Law and Justice Party, PIS. Now, PIS are so the former president and prime minister were pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, but they're also really kind of MAGA, and their support for Ukraine needs to be understood in that context. But the party that is pro-Russia, like AfD is pro-Russia, so PIS differs from, say, Fidesz in Hungary and AfD in Germany, as being particularly Polish and having that relationship with Russia. That means that PIS are anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine. So you broadly have bipartisan support across the Polish political spectrum in the main parties for Ukraine. However, you've got this party called Confederation, right, which is your really right-wing party. Now, PIS has been suffering in the polls, even though they were thought to be doing quite well and maybe, going up in the polls. Actually, more recently, they've then been going down, and because they're losing votes, maybe partly because Donald Tusk is doing okay, but largely to do with leaking votes to the Confederation Party on the far right, who are pro-Russian, right? And this is a challenge going forward. So what will PIS do in Poland to counter that? And then we go to look at the UK. You've just seen it in Parliament, right, where the Conservatives and Reform seem to be rather similar at the moment with regards to, say, the war in Iran. And that's because Reform have taken all of the Conservative votes, as some from Labour as well, but majority of the Reform votes come from the Conservatives, and that has decimated the Tories. And so Kemi Badenoch, as a leader, or any leader for the Tories, has to make one of two choices. One, do you chase the Reform vote and try and be more right-wing than the right-wing party, more populist than the right-wing party, talk about anti-woke, anti-immigration, all that stuff? Or do you go like what we would call one nation conservatism? Do you go moderate conservatism like the Conservative Party arguably used to be, or at least a large proportion of the Conservative Party used to be that? Think people like Rory Stewart and Sebastian Gork and people like that. Kemi Badenoch decided to chase reform. So the Conservatives in the UK are trying to be more right-wing populist than Nigel Farage. That's their decision. Poland, they've got the same decision on their hands. Do they become more confederation-like, or do they keep a more centre-right positioning? Jarosław Kaczynski has just made a huge gamble that will shape Polish politics all the way to the 2027 parliamentary election. By backing Przemysław Czarnek as Law and Justice's candidate for Prime Minister, Kaczynski has decided where he thinks the party's future lies. PIS, so Law and Justice, is losing voters on its right flank. Support has been leaking to the Confederacja, and to Grzegorz Braun. So Grzegorz Braun is this guy who's gone into, remember, he's gone into these town halls and burnt the EU flag and pulled down Ukrainian flags. He's gaining more and more. And some polls, PIS is now approaching the psychologically dangerous 20% mark. So they losing kind of 15% in pretty quick succession. Czarnek is meant to stop that drift. He is one of the most hardline figures in PIS, ultra-conservative culture warrior, so anti-woke, who speaks the language of the nationalist right. In Kaczynski's thinking, he is a politician best placed to fight Sławomir Mencen, Krzysztof Bosak and Brown for the electorate. So you've got these right-wing parties. It's not just Confederation. There are a couple of these really batshit crazy right-wing parties that are gaining and gaining. And the way to fight them, PISC, is to try and out right-wing populist nationalist them. The decision effectively sidelines former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. So he was a former Prime Minister for PIS before Donald Tusk became Prime Minister, who was pro-Ukrainian. And his more moderate faction inside the party, the internal divide between the two camps has been growing for months, and this move risks deepening it further. So Kaczynski has made his choice: fight for the radical right first, deal with the internal consequences later. What's really interesting is we see this replicated in virtually every country that has fewer parties, I think. So, for example, the United States, this is what's happened with the GOP. You've got we've seen it today, Tom Tillis coming on and saying Stephen Miller's batshit crazy. Right? Tom Tillis is your moderate conservative, broadly speaking. Your moderate Republicans have kind of no home at the moment because the party's been taken over by Trumpist MAGA. That's kind of where the conservatives are at. Do you split? Do you merge with reform? Do you try and embrace centrism? Or do you out-reform reform? Here, do you out Confederation? Do you outdo them as PIS? Or do you go to the moderates centre ground? Well, they're clearly not going to the moderate centre ground. And this, I wonder how this will affect, A, the electability of PIS and Confederation, whether it splits the votes, what's going to happen there, and does that allow the coalition to maintain power? Or what will it look like going forward in support for Ukraine and Europe, so on and so forth. Anyway, that's that from Europe. A few things I've been going on quite a long time, but a few things on the United States that I think are worth looking at. Right, just seeing what you guys are talking about. You're talking about traffic through the Straits of Hormuz down 90%. Yeah, it's not looking good there. Okay, right. We are going to go to look a little bit at the US, not too long in this section. We have this news that Mike Levin says this story cannot keep flying under the radar. A ProPublica investigation, these are really good investigative journalists, A ProPublica investigation has uncovered hundreds of millions of dollars in financial ties between Trump officials and the industries they're supposed to be regulating. This is not just a conflict of interest, it's corruption, plain and simple. This is the most corrupt administration in American history by far. History will show us quite how corrupt this administration is, but it's stuff like this. It's the lobbying, but it's also the grifting from people like the Trump family, the Witkoff family, Jared Kushner, well, it's part of the Trump family, so on and so forth. We've now got Trump's sons having this drone entity called Power Us, is it, or Power US? They are looking at going into business with the Ukrainians, but of course, they'll be in prime position to be selling contracts to the Department of Defense, so on and so forth. John Neguzzi the other day told us about that $143 million contract for that DHS's Kristi Noem signed, when 8 days before that entity didn't exist, and it turns out it's connected to her and blah, blah, blah. And you wonder why she was then suddenly fired and moved sideways. Like, the amount of corruption is absolutely staggering at the moment. And, whatever you imagine it is, probably times it by 10. But moving on from rank corruption, let's just remind ourselves of Donald Trump's, I think, cognitive decline. I had an argument with someone who used to post a lot more on here, John Reed. He was like, I can't believe you're talking about, he just gave a 2-hour State of the Union address. This guy has not got dementia, like you have said before. I was like, hang on, are you saying there is no cognitive decline of Donald Trump? And he said, absolutely. To which I presented like a whole bunch of evidence for cognitive decline. I mean, call it what you will, whether it's dementia or something, the guy is cognitively declining. And you can tell that by comparing his speeches now to his speeches 5 years ago, right? By looking at how much he sleeps now compared to how much he used to sleep, what his working day looks like, how he falls asleep on camera. You're telling me there's no cognitive decline there? He's falling asleep on camera, or physiological decline. You've got big bruises on his hands, and you've got like some of his speeches are just gibbering messes. Here, listen to this.
Like voter ID, but it can be given to you by your daughter. Your daughter, she has to be of age, like above 6 years old. She's allowed to say. You had to see some of this stuff is so bad.
Okay, slip of the tongue. He meant to say, when your daughter comes of age. I mean, in the time of Epstein, this is pretty controversial. When your daughter comes of age, 6 years old. Presume you mean 16 there, my man. But that's the sort of thing that's happening. Like, stuff like that's happening all the time. Now, if Biden had said stuff like that, he would have been absolutely crucified by by Fox News. But no, this guy gets away with it. It's just absolutely incredible. And he's saying crazy stuff every single day. Right, jobs. Let's just listen to a bit of scary jobs news in the US.
We're back with a Fox News alert. It's a business one. Moments ago, brand new job numbers revealed. The U.S. economy did not add jobs. They lost 92,000 jobs in February, a steep drop from expectations. Unemployment also ticked up slightly to 4.4%.
So, expecting to gain 59,000 jobs, they lost 92,000. Expecting unemployment to be 4.3% to 4.4%. Alarm bells should be ringing for the midterms. Like, if the price of oil is going to go up because the war in Iran, I think Trump thought would be a real vote winner because he was looking dodgy in the polls anyway. Let's go to war, rally round a flag, except it's not a popular war, and the shutting the Strait of Hormuz is an absolute catastrophe economically speaking. So I'm sure that he's now panicking behind closed doors. Meanwhile, those US jobs numbers, they have been revised downwards, so that the one you just saw will be revised down, and that was already negative. So these are all the jobs numbers for the last however many months since January 2024. In each of the last 13 months, they've been revised by a total of 710,000, which means the employment was initially overstated by an average of 55,000 jobs a month. So basically, they get data in from some entities, and then they have to guess other entities like big corporations, and then the corporations eventually get their data in a bit later, So you refactor that in for the month before, you know, the month after, you refactor it in for that month. And so they're always changing it, but recently it's always been rejigged downwards. So US numbers were revised down by another 4,000 jobs in January and 65,000 jobs in December. This brings a December reading down to negative 17,000, marking the 5th contraction over the last 9 months. So you've got 5 contractions of the economy, of the jobs market in 9 months of the Trump administration. Since January 2024, there have been downward revisions in 24 out of 25 months. Sorry, so downwards in all, sorry, not all of them, 24 out of 25, the last 13, but in the last 25, 24 out of them have been revised downwards. So that big negative that you've just seen there, that will be revised, I would presume, to an even worse number. US labor market data is more unreliable than ever. And of course, that's because they keep sacking people. They not requiring quarterly reporting, I think, anymore. Anyway, all of this, the question about all of this is, how does it look for the midterms? Well, there's been another special election that's taken place in, where are we? New Hampshire State House, Carroll District 7 Special Edition. Democrat Bobby Boudman has defeated Republican Dale Fincher, and I think it went from a Republican +9 to a Democrat +14, something like that, somewhere around those numbers. This is a flip, and it's another flip. So it's the 28th flip in legislative seats since the presidential election, and Republicans have flipped none. So in other words, if you're a betting person, don't bet on Republicans taking a seat off Democrats in whatever type of election it is. Now, what you are seeing is, and apparently we also have a Republican who's now declaring he's going to be independent, although he'll probably caucus with the Republicans. He is going to go independent. Where is he? He is in California. And I think that's because as a result of the redistricting, the gerrymandering that's taking place, he would likely be done for. Right, so he's read the tea leaves and he's going to become an independent, which means, I presume this means 217 goes down to 216, goes down to 215. Like, this is why people are thinking before the midterm elections, Mike Johnson, the majority speaker, might lose his gavel. So there is that. That is something to really, really watch out for. And in fact, on the kind of politics side of things, James Tallarico has just, he's now polling above both John Cornyn and Ken Paxton, the two people who are running to be the Republican Senate nominee for this Texas Senate district. James Tallarico beat Jasmine Crockett. He is your young, white, Christian guy, progressive. So he's got this really interesting mix that I think is exactly right for Texas. And he's gaining loads of momentum. And he's now, I think he's now polling above both of those Republicans. And so that's going to be fascinating. So they might lose a Senate seat in Texas. That'd be absolutely incredible. You have got polling for Sherrod Brown up in Ohio, is it? He's now above the Republican there. You've got, so that the Democrats need to win all these Senate seats in order, they need to flip a bunch of Senate seats in order to regain the Senate. They're definitely going to they will win unless Trump cheats hugely. They will easily win the House of Representatives, the lower house. But to win the Senate, they have to, it's not a good year because you have a third of senators up every 2 years. And the third that are up this time, difficult for the Democrats to win, but it's looking like there's going to be a landslide. And being a landslide year, they've got a chance of nicking some of these seats they otherwise wouldn't have won. Texas is one of them. They need places like Maine. So Susan Collins, at the moment, you've got two people that are going to run in a primary for the Democrats against Susan Collins in Maine. A guy called Graham Plattner and Susan, what's her face? Who is it? Susan Mills? No, she was the one that she's a governor that challenged Donald Trump in court and then won a court case against Trump, famously. But she's quite old. Graham Plattner is a veteran guy, a little bit controversial past, but I think that's all sorted itself out. He's an oyster farmer and a veteran guy, and he's really progressive. And he's, again, all this interesting mix of local guy who is polling way above Susan Collins now. And so you're looking at these places that Democrats look like they are going to pick up, and they could swing the Senate. And this has got to be your best year for trying to do that. If Trump keeps doing things like going to war, not sorting out inflation, being disastrous in lots of different ways. Anyway, that's enough on the electoral side of things. Hopefully all of this makes sense to people. Anne Applebaum here talking about Kerry Lake. Do you remember Kerry Lake was put, and she's controversial. She was someone that tried to win a seat in Arizona, is it? Did she lose against Gallego? She's tried to win a bunch of seats and keeps losing. She is a big fan of Trump. She had a big argument with Emily Maitlis when, as a British reporter, was in America at the Republican Congress, Republican conference, I think, before the election. And there was that big argument between Emily Maitlis and Kerry Lake. Anyway, Kerry Lake, after Trump came into power, was put in charge of the US Agency for Global Media. So things like New Voice of America, and Radio Free Liberty, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, all that kind of stuff. She was put in charge of the US Agency for Global Media. And it's now turned out a district court judge has ruled that Kerry Lake was not legally in charge of the agency, and the actions she took while claiming to be in that role are also not legal. So anything she did to do with those agencies, I guess, need to be rescinded. And that could be good for Ukraine, by the way, including her attempts to fire people. This is really, really significant. So that is Kerry Lake. And she's, less said about her, I guess, the better. I told you I was going to talk. Oh, no, I'm not even showing you this stuff. But anyway, I was saying here is the court ruling, just in case you want to look at court rulings. That's Kerry Lake. Kerry Lake. That is her, in case you didn't know what she looks like. We're going to talk about shoes now. Concentrate on the little things. I often say this because it gives you a window into the bigger things. This next piece I'm going to talk, and this is pretty much going to be the end of what I have to say. We'll look at some of your comments. If you want a sense of how much Donald Trump is an authoritarian dictator wannabe, this is it. Donald Trump famously bought Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio pairs of shoes because he's like, these are shoes that I like, therefore you're going to like them. My dad does stuff like this. My dad, it'll be like, oh, Jonathan, I've got you a printer because I've got this printer. So I've got you this. Dad, I've got a printer. My printer's really good. It's fine. Yeah, but I've got this printer. I've got this printer and it's really good. Yeah, no, that's brilliant, Dad. I don't need that printer, but thank you. But that's what a waste of money. Why didn't you ask me first? Yeah, but I've got this printer, therefore you should have it. My dad's always been like that. I've got this thing, therefore you should have this thing. And we're all like that a bit. Like, oh, I love this album. I love this song. I love this band. You should like this band. I love this TV show. You should like this TV show, right? We're always impressing onto other people. We're projecting our own desires and whatnot. But when it comes to someone in charge of a country telling these people that they should be wearing these shoes, exactly these shoes, I think it starts to get a bit worrying and it looks a bit like a weird dictatorship. Well, that's what's happened. So Trump got these shoes, but famously he guessed the sizes for like Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio here caught wearing these $150 Florsheim dress shoes. And you can see at the back that they're a good size or two too big. Marco Rubio wearing oversized shoes that Trump ordered for him by just guessing his size, according to the Times. Trump has been buying $145 Florsheim dress shoes for allies, using the gifts as a light-hearted way to encourage loyalty and unity within his circle. That's the key. Like, this is the sort of thing you would do if you wanted to control all the people around you very immediately. This is a sort of like, you know, when you have a cabinet meeting where everyone is clapping him. The other day, what was it? There was a meeting that I can't remember which meeting he was at. somewhere. I think they were all standing up, but they applauded Trump for like 3 minutes or something. It was really uncomfortably weird, like a minute and a half. Or so. Normally, if you applaud something, it's like 20 seconds tops, but this is like a minute and a half, which is the sort of thing you do if you're in a dictatorship. Here, Trump, but it goes further. Trump coercing staff to wear the same pair of black shoes that he wears. Quote, everybody's afraid not to wear them, a staffer said, as some reportedly ditch their own footwear to comply with Trump's wishes. We're officially in the dumbest timeline, says Miles Taylor, who was formerly in Trump 1.0. They're all wearing Trump shoes. It's just, honestly, it's so weird and so pathetic. I just honestly, I think he just wants to live in North Korea, where everyone just treats him like some idealized, quasi deified leader. And the last thing for my Canadian friends, I'm wearing a Canadian top, courtesy of Michael Vuchar. Here is Storm Surf Shop from Vancouver Island. Vancouver Island on the side there. So just for my Canadian friends, that's why I've got this one last here. Enough is enough, says this person. I get when Prime Minister Mark Carney said he can handle name calling for the greater good. It is a selfless move to look past personal attacks when so much is at stake for our country. But at some point, this has to stop. When a foreign leader refers to our Prime Minister as governor, it is no longer just a jab, which is what he did with Justin Trudeau, remember? But then it stopped with Mark Carney, and now it started again. It is an implication that Canada is the 51st state, or will be. This is a clear challenge to our sovereignty. This is imperial language from Donald Trump. I would love to see Anita Anand, that's the foreign minister, use a traditional diplomatic dance here. We should be summoning the US ambassador to Canada for a formal explanation of this narrative. I agree with that, by the way. We need to recalibrate our strategy and remind our neighbors that we are a sovereign partner. Donald Trump here. I'm working with Governor Gretchen Whitmer on trying to save the Great Lakes from the rather violent and destructive Asian carp, which is rapidly taking over Lake Michigan, and all of the beautiful surrounds. I'll be asking other governors to join in with this fight, including those of Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, New York, and of course, the future governor of Canada, Mark Carney, who I will be happy to contribute to his worthy cause. Separately, I'm also working to, so on and so forth. Is that a joke? Kinda, not really, don't know. Is it rude? Yes. Is it presidential? No, unless you don't see yourself as a president, but as a dictatorial emperor. What a crazy world we're living in. What a crazy timeline, as people keep saying. Nuts. Anyway, Donald Trump, be gone with you. Can't wait till you're gone. Come on, McDonald's, do your job. Do your job, McDonald's. Do it. Do it quickly. Right, some thank you to you guys. Here's to you, says Max Towns. Thank you, Max. Here's to you too. I appreciate your support. Thank you kindly. Julian Rossiter. Iran is dragging the US out of a boxing match and into a street fight. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, it's obviously bad for Iran. They have, goodness knows how many people have been killed, but they've definitely had their military mauled, absolutely mauled. But I guess if Iran keep hold of their oil revenue going forward, and I guess that's going to be the thing, if they keep hold of their oil revenue and kind of nationalize it to the max, and then use that to fund themselves. If they retain an Islamic fundamentalist regime, how quickly would it take for them to retool their armed forces to the point where the US would have to bomb them again? And it's this cycle of endless bombings. So the US, in whatever they do here, are probably going to have to think about how to stop that from happening. But how do you stop that from happening without existing somehow in Iran, or by continually bombing Iran? So anyway, that is, for me, one of the big considerations. Anna Anderson, What is the legal difference, if any, on Russia attacking Ukraine and the US attacking Iran? None. That's why I said that my position is we should not support the US, even though I do not like Iran. We should not support the US because it's against international law. And there is therefore no functional difference between what Russia is doing in Ukraine and what the US is doing in Iran. We might not like Iran, right? But you can't just go and burn down a house because it's got someone in there you think's a criminal. Vigilantism is illegal for a reason, because then it's just, well, if we accept vigilantism, then it's whatever you subjectively think is the right thing to do. And if you're stronger than anyone else, it essentially is might is right. You either have international law to make sure that might is right is not the thing that prevails, because then you get World War II or World War III. You either have international law or you don't. And if you don't, that's freaking dangerous. So we have international law. So the US shouldn't be doing that until they've got legal justification for doing that. And that requires finding evidence for the things they are claiming that Iran has in place. Otherwise, the US looks no different from Russia. The US is not only aligned with Russia at the moment, it's functionally acting like Russia. It is another form of Russia. And that's the Trump administration, not my American friends, of course. Graham Baker, thank you for your ATP Geopolitics memberships. Graham, super, super appreciated. Schwitz Dog, to get Americans to rally around a flag, you need to address the American people still waiting. Yeah, I presume you mean in terms of, I mean, Trump has not taken the war in Iran to the American people. He's not explained it. There have been these multiple reasons given, and then it appears that they are ditching some of those reasons because they're completely unobtainable. And then now it's just coming down to just being a military shindig. They're just, well, we thought we'd blow up loads of stuff. They're the bad guys, so we're blowing up loads of military stuff. It's kind of like, it's an extended training exercise, just like see how much stuff we can blow up. That's a little bit different. I mean, there will be some Americans that'll be happy with that. They'll be Yahoo, yay, USA, and they'll be flying their flags proudly. But most people aren't fans of that, especially when it's very expensive and it's the risk of getting involved in an intractable situation. JD 8019 says, we created God to house their virtue. The remainder was in what we call evil. Show your boys Trump so they know it need to not religious. I need to understand that. That looks like a comment that's right up my alley as well. But it's always difficult to make sure I understand what people are trying to say. I'll try and work that one out. But thank you, JD. I do appreciate that. Okay. Right. Just seeing if you guys, I was completely unable to see if you guys had anything important to say. And I'm sure you did because you are wonderful. And yeah, well, you could say that Iran was attacking its own people. This is JD again, like Russia said about Ukraine, prompting their liberating protection. But we all know Trump doesn't give two shizzles about the people. I mean, yeah, it's very clear now that the regime change and the beneficial humanitarian outcome for the Iranian people is not on the agenda anymore for Trump. And it never would have been, it would have only ever been a veneer post hoc rationalization. So an after the fact rationalization of the war in Iran, because the war really would be economics first, nukes second, power flex third, and really, the humanitarian democracy thing, I think, would be last place down the list of reasons why Trump was getting involved there. Okay, thank you, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope the pleasure was at least some part yours. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate your support. Please check out the videos. Have I done? There's a few yesterday that are slightly more evergreen. They aren't just ones that are completely topical. So there's one on drone dominance. There's one on the new FP 5-point missiles and drones. Those two videos you haven't seen are really useful little indicators of positivity going on for Ukraine. I'm quite upbeat about Ukraine at the moment. The only challenge is what Trump has done in Iran. It is a gift to Putin. It's like, here's $50 billion of oil income and gas income. So the question is, how does Ukraine react to that? If Ukraine is going to start kinetic campaigns again against the hydrocarbon sector, I think America will put heaps of pressure on Ukraine, because they will not want Ukraine to blow up refineries and oil depots in Russia. It's happened before. They put pressure on the Ukrainians to do that before, but then the world got used to oil and gas without Russia, so it wasn't so important. So America wasn't too bothered about those kinetic strikes. But as soon as oil and gas on the global market becomes, Russian oil and gas becomes prevalent, becomes important for the US in terms of keeping the prices down, then, you know, the US, I would imagine, might put some pressure on Ukraine not to strike at oil infrastructure going forward, which then is an interesting one, because if Ukraine decide to say, screw you, we're going to do that, then it shows you that Ukraine might have enough confidence in doing things outside of what the US dictates to them. But I still think they're probably beholden to the US, and they won't want to do what the US explicitly tells them not to do. So we'll see that. It's an interesting question here, or point here from Rolf Army, who says the next anti-Kings protest, anti-Trump protest might be interesting. I wonder if you might get a huge turnout. Have they organized a date for the next one, the No Kings rallies? I'm not sure, but yeah, it could be huge. Anyway, thanks. I appreciate that you appreciate it. It was a good live, so thank you, Kevin. Hopefully I make sense to you. Thanks, K Joy. Thanks, JP. Appreciate you and all those behind the scenes with you. Well, actually, right now it is just me. It is just me. There is no one behind the scenes. This is everything me. But Benny Pye does help me with some techie stuff, and JR sometimes behind the scenes with comments and whatnot, and he does campaigns. We're looking at starting up a new fundraiser with Richard Woodruff from Frontline Kit, and that should be up and running at some point. I'll have to find out what the timeline is on that. We're trying to get that sorted. Anyway, on March the 28th. Okay, so that 17 days. Now, because then it becomes, okay, this will be the famous long goodbyes. You know what I'm like. That's going to be an anti-war rally, as well as it's going to be an Epstein rally, an anti-war rally. It's going to be a protest about inflation, prices, democracy. There's all sorts that's going to be about. So that's a big old one there. Thank you. We're all behind you. Yeah, you are indeed. Thank you. Right. Okay, guys, take care. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips. Big love.